0304 hours, January 17th, 1991, Syria, Iraq. The desert was still. Cold wind drifted across the flat plain, inside a reinforced bunker. Lieutenant Colonel Arkady Smirnov stood over a glowing console. He had trained radar crews for decades. Libya, Syria, Iraq. Tonight's crew, manning a Soviet-made SNR-125 radar, followed the manual down to the second. A strike was expected. American bombers, maybe British tornadoes. The men were alert, fingers on toggles, eyes on screens. Smirnov leaned closer, watching the sweep line roll. Nothing. The skies were empty. Then came the thud, not distant, not muffled, not avoidable. A ripple of heat, then fire. The control van rocked, consoles sparked. Smirnov hit the floor. The room shook with a second explosion outside. The radar antenna collapsed in flames. The crew scrambled for exits. Smirnov stayed. He turned to the screen. Still nothing. Not a blip, not a trail, not a shadow, only flatline green. Perfect function. 0 returns. And yet, they had been struck. Missiles had hit them, and the radar designed to see everything had seen nothing. Minutes later, across the valley, a second radar site was gone. Same event, same result. Smirnov scribbled in his notebook, shaking, no jamming, no signal loss. Just nothing. They followed the engagement checklist exactly. The system was operational. The emitter was live. The sky was empty. And then it wasn't. There was no warning, no signature, no chance. They were not jammed. They were blind and didn't know it. Pushkino, Soviet Union Radar Training Academy, 1989 here. The sky was measurable, predictable, trackable. Inside a circular auditorium rimmed with consoles and cathode screens, instructors taught with absolute clarity. Diagrams of radar cones, clutter zones, Doppler gates. Students rotated through the 4 primary systems: early warning, height finder, target acquisition, fire control. The principle was gospel radar sees everything. Doctrine taught that stealth was exaggerated science fiction. One colonel scoffed. True invisibility would require bending physics, and Soviet engineers knew better. The core beliefs drilled into every operator were simple. No aircraft could fly without reflecting energy. Every threat left a signature. The only true radar failure came from jamming. You jam. We burned through, barked one instructor. Stealth, they insisted, could be minimized, but not nullified. Any object of military mass wings, fuselage, engine would bounce a beam. That bounce meant survival. Credential drop. Number 1 General Anatoly Terikov, chief designer behind the P-18 Spoon Rest radar, once wrote, "No aircraft can fly in the void. It must disturb the air, and radar sees disturbance." The curriculum left no room for absence. Training emphasized speed of lock, radar discipline, band switching under duress. Operators were taught to expect noise, clutter, interference, but never nothing. Blank scope meant 2 things: peace or equipment failure. It never meant incoming strike. No one imagined the radar would show full function, yet reveal nothing. They believed radar failure would scream. Instead, it whispered. They taught physics, not absence. Soviet radar doctrine wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. A worldview etched into schematics and signal chains. At its core was one absolute: if it flies, it reflects. If it reflects, it's seen. That truth shaped every detection system from the P-12 to the 36D6. It governed target classification, lock sequence, and missile queuing. Operators trusted the beam, not the eye. The machine spoke truth. Always. Principle 1. Return strength, hunter, threat, visibility. The larger the aircraft, the stronger the echo. Heavy bombers lit up the screen. Fighters left slender trails. Small targets could be filtered, but nothing disappeared completely. Principle 2. Altitude. Filtering blocks. Clutter. Low-flying objects cluttered with ground returns. Operators were taught to gate out noise. Assume fast movers above 300 meters. Principle 3. Multiple bands. Guarantee detection. If one radar missed a contact, another frequency would catch it. Early warning, target acquisition, and height-finding systems overlapped. Credential drop number 2 Dr. Pavel Yudin, Ph.D. in radar wave propagation, authored signal behavior maps for Warsaw Pact nations. His work predicted beam scatter, edge diffraction, terrain shadowing, but not negation. Flaw 1. They assumed targets would reflect, not redirect. Flaw 2. They assumed emissions meant detection. Flaw 3. They assumed more power equaled more clarity. Every radar innovation aimed at enhancing presence, detecting more, filtering better, none of them prepared for intentional absence. Not jamming, not deception. Disappearance. Yudin once warned that over-reliance on signal strength made operators complacent. His words went unpublished. We measure presence. We do not understand silence. They built systems to detect echoes. No one trained to interpret silence. 030 2 hours, January 17th, 1991, north of Basra, Iraq. A P-18 radar station activates, crew scans low altitude, night air thick with anticipation. Intercept expected within minutes. The screen glows green. Sweep rotates. Signal clean. No targets. 030308, the scope refreshes. Still blank. Operator toggles gain. Nothing. 030320, a faint static line. No return. 030333, alarm, sharp tone, not radar-based, external censored. 030341, explosion. Ground shutters. 030345, power cuts. Screens go black. Outside. The radar vehicle is engulfed in flames. The crew had done everything by the book. Radar bands scanned wide. No jamming detected. System functioned perfectly until it didn't. Miles away, another site, same class, same protocol. EU30512, radar activates. SO30517, sweep normal. 30521, operator sees flicker, uncertain. 30524, explosion. Radar gone. Post-action reports from surviving Iraqi crews revealed no sign of malfunction, no frequency disruption, no overload, no equipment failure. Credential drop bus 3. A declassified post-battle review concluded. No radar anomaly, no interference, apparent functionality, no detection. Crews were stunned. They had tracked everything from Israeli jets to Iranian drones. But now they were blind, and they didn't even know it. They called it a glitch. It wasn't. They were looking with open eyes at nothing, and nothing killed them. They weren't jammed. They were outmatched. Back in Moscow, the initial reports were treated with mild concern, not alarm. 2 radar losses in the first wave. Expected. American SAID was aggressive, but not unprecedented. Then 4 more sites reported destruction without prior lock or warning. The response from command, dismissive. At Frunze and Zhukovsky academies, senior instructors offered tidy explanations, improper scan alignment, power surge likely degraded signal. Iraqi crews may have misconfigured the lobe gain. Each theory put the fault on people, not systems. Credential drop for Major General Viktor Petrov, head of ground-based air defense oversight, issued a statement, radar does not fail silently. This is human error, not technical surprise. In internal memos, Petrov blamed operators too slow to switch bands, failed to verify power distribution, improper altitude tracking assumptions. No one in Moscow could accept that the radar had worked perfectly and still seen nothing. They couldn't admit that what they'd built, the P-18, the SNR-125, the 5N-84A, had all functioned exactly as designed. And that was the problem. No jamming, No deception, no warning, just silence. The battlefield reports were rewritten before analysis. Language changed, radar failure became operator confusion. Undetected strike became visibility lapse, but one handwritten margin note leaked from the first GRU inquiry. They followed procedure. The sky lied. They dismissed silence as noise. They never imagined it was the signal. With mounting losses and silence still unexplained, Soviet analysts proposed the first false solution, high-altitude jamming. The theory held that American electronic warfare aircraft, F-111 Ravens or EC-130s, were flooding the upper atmosphere with directed noise, creating artificial dead zones. The idea fit Soviet expectations. If radar couldn't see, something must be interfering. Soviet engineers responded quickly. Orders went out to switch radar bands between VHF and UHF in rapid succession, shorten pulse intervals to defeat blanket noise, retrain crews to manually scan side lobes and search for jamming shadows. Mobile SAM units were ordered to rotate positions hourly, changing elevation and antenna angles. Academy simulations were updated overnight. Trainees practiced under theoretical high-altitude jamming cones. Instructors explained this was classic Western saturation. Familiar, understandable. It calmed the command structure. There was only one problem. The F-117 didn't jam. It didn't emit radar. It didn't speak to satellites. It didn't ping for GPS. It flew dark. Its signal was not masked by noise. It was absent. Credential Drop, a Soviet radar technician in Syria, monitoring Gulf War events in real time, noted in his log no spike, no suppression, just non-existence. But in Moscow, the jamming theory stuck because it gave them something to fight. You can counter a jammer. You can triangulate noise. You can chase ghosts. But you cannot chase nothing. They scanned the interference and never saw the void. As losses mounted and jamming theories lost credibility, a second explanation emerged. Cruise missiles, not aircraft, were to blame. The logic was clean. If radar couldn't detect planes, maybe planes weren't striking at all. Maybe Tomahawks were the real culprits, flying too low, too slow, too small for Soviet radar arrays to track. Analysts embraced the idea. Unlike stealth aircraft, cruise missiles made sense. They were hard to see, but not impossible. They matched earlier NATO strikes Yugoslavia, Lebanon, Afghanistan. Soviet advisors recommended a new countermeasure: reprogram radar sweep intervals for low-speed tracking, widen altitude filters to search the terrain contour, assign secondary batteries to monitor ingress points along rivers, valleys, and canyons. Mobile radars were told to go active for longer periods, continuous sweep, no dead time. Command was pleased. This was manageable, understandable, logical. But the sites kept dying. Radar logs showed nothing. No approach, no signature, no terrain shadowing. Credential drop. A Soviet field engineer deployed to Mosul sent a one-line report: radar sweep adjusted. No track, no target, site destroyed. The truth was becoming harder to ignore. These weren't cruise missile strikes. They were aircraft strikes. And the aircraft didn't reflect. They didn't scatter. They didn't even shimmer. One operator, in his last recorded log, wrote, "I think the sky is lying to us. They aimed lower, they scanned slower, they hunted missiles, but the threat was higher, and it was never there." By early February 1991, the Soviet GRU and technical branches initiated a classified audit operation vector. Its mission: determine whether radar failures were mechanical, procedural, or something else entirely. Teams gathered data from Iraqi SAM sites, burned out control vans, melted antenna arrays, black boxes from surviving systems. Radar logs were pulled, cross-checked, reanalyzed. Engineers reviewed each site's last 30 seconds of emission data. What they found shook them. The radars hadn't failed. They had functioned perfectly. Power levels normal, emissions clean, no sign of jamming, interference, or degradation. They had emitted as trained, and then they were gone. Each radar, when plotted against American strike flight paths, had coincided with an F-117 vector, a jet known to exist, but rarely confirmed. Except, in these cases, the flight plan was reconstructed after the site's destruction. In every instance, the radar scanned, saw nothing, was struck, had no time to react. Credential drop, number 5 GRU assessment memo. Top secret stated strike aircraft passed through effective range. Radar returned no contact, no deception detected. Signature, below noise floor. That phrase, below the noise floor, would haunt every radar instructor from 1991 onward. It meant the aircraft wasn't hiding. It was simply unseeable, not jammed, not evading, just physically undetectable. One colonel, during the final review, whispered to his peer, "We built eyes that only see the past." The audit ended with a single sentence. If a target returns no signal, radar becomes irrelevant. The systems had worked flawlessly. That was the failure. The Americans didn't blind Soviet radar. They erased its relevance. Technology 1, F-117 stealth. Geometry, Soviet radar relied on returns echoes, bouncing back from edges and surfaces. The F-117's faceted shape scattered radar waves away from their source. It didn't bounce, it deflected. To the radar, it wasn't a fighter. It was silence. Soviet expectations, sharp corners reflect. American reality, sharp angles redirect. Combat result P-18 saw nothing as F-117s dropped bombs 20 meters from the antenna. Technology 2 radar-absorbent materials. RAM Soviet systems expected metal, fuel, and paint to reflect pulses. RAM coating on the F-117 absorbed those pulses, not redirected, swallowed. Soviet expectation. More power, marker, more reflection. American reality. Less return, less detection. Combat result. Iraqi radars increased gain, still no contact. Missiles launched at air, nothing came. Technology 3 infrared signature suppression. The SNR-125 used thermal seekers as backup. Soviet belief engines burn hot tracked them. But F-117s vented exhaust across upper fuselage and mixed it with cool air. Soviet expectation heat, visibility. American reality. No flare, no track. Combat result. Multiple IR locks failed. One operator noted, "We saw heat from the bomb, not the jet." Technology 4 passive flight profiles. F-117s didn't emit radar, data links, or voice signals. No radio chatter, no beacon. Soviet expectation, all aircraft talk. American reality. F-117 spoke only through explosions. Combat result. EW crews heard nothing. Strike already complete. Technology 5 precision, navigation, INS plus GPS. Soviet doctrine required mid-flight correction. Americans didn't. F-117s flew GPS-guided routes in silence. Soviet expectation. Targeting requires tracking. American reality and visibility requires no correction. Combat result. Bombs struck buildings crews still believe were safe. Credential drop, Nart 6 Ben Rich, head of Skunk Works. Paraphrased. The best radar return is none at all. The radar didn't fail, it never saw the fight, because the fight refused to exist in its spectrum. January 19, 1991, Baghdad, Iraq. The night was silent. Radars active. SAM crews on alert. They saw nothing. 300. SNR-125 scan clean. 03 Guam. Operators confirm signal health. 0302. Flash outside. Vibration. 0303 command center hit. Antenna destroyed. No targets seen. No missiles fired. 35 aircraft flew into one of the most defended airspaces in the world. None were detected. None were lost. Battle score 35 F-117s penetrated layered Soviet radar. 10 strike targets destroyed. 0 radar locks. 0 launches, 0 aircraft lost. Micro-narration continued 0304. SA-6 crew scrambles, 03005, radar activates, 0300504, nothing on scope, 0300508, secondary explosion, van destroyed, score Americans 2, Soviets 0. Radar operators followed doctrine, scan, sweep, adjust gain, watch, confirm, react. It was flawless execution, and they were systematically deleted. They didn't break the system, they executed it. Reversal lines. They believed radar ruled the sky, it lit their graves. They believed silence meant safety. It meant war had already begun. They believed doctrine was protection. It became a death script. Credential drop a KGB after-action report. Quietly archived, stated engagement protocol observed, target unknown. Sight lost. They obeyed their training, and it killed them. Progressive scoring. Minute 1, 7 radar sites lost. Minute 5, 12 strikes complete. Minute 10, 0 aircraft lost. They didn't lose the radar war. They were never in it. Moscow couldn't ignore the results any longer. Not a glitch, not human error, not even jamming. A systemic collapse. Senior analysts convened in late February to extract lessons. What they found were not tactical errors, but ideological failures. 1. Presence. Power radar taught that to see was to control. But stealth wasn't just absence, it was dominance. Soviet belief vision equaled influence. American reality dominance required silence. 2. Power detection. More wattage, broader sweep, longer range. None of it mattered if the return signal never came. They boosted gain. The screen stayed black. It wasn't about reaching the target. It was about whether the target reflected it all. 3. Process reaction. Doctrine demanded sequences detection, tracking, confirmation, fire. But American strike tempo outpaced the procedure. Operators didn't react slowly. They reacted perfectly to nothing. 4. Reality training. Every radar simulation drilled clutter rejection, altitude gating, band switching. None of it mattered when the aircraft left no signature. They trained for noise. They died in silence. One Soviet colonel whispered during the final debrief, "We trained them to hunt reflections. The enemy removed the mirror." Credential drop. A post-war doctrinal memo circulated privately among radar academies. Silence is no longer peace. It is warning. This wasn't failure to detect. This was failure to imagine detection wouldn't happen at all. A shattered radar van sits in the desert. The sand has swallowed most of its frame. Only the antenna base remains half melted. Jagged metal twisted toward a sky it once watched. Inside, a CRT screen flickers. The last log is still visible. System status: green. Sweep active. Contacts none. The machine worked. The operators complied. The doctrine executed. And it meant nothing. Because the enemy had changed the rules. What they built wasn't just a radar.